Hi everybody, just another quick video showing you some of the sources. So obviously over the last few weeks you've been exposed to a number of new sources, a number of different types of link to help you with that white and grey credibility of literature development in your learning. Last week we introduced in the seminars elements about the Nielsen reports, and these link also to some of those other links that I've sent through to you over the last few weeks and posted onto the Blackboard site. One of the ways of why we've tried to develop the module in the way we have and expose you to some of the sources is it is obviously difficult in some cases when you're going through the initial part of trying to understand the external and internal environment that you don't need to be talking about the organisation. And we do have a number of databases where they are predominantly useful for being able to break down your organisation, and that will cross with what you therefore think they should do as a consequence when you've broken down how the organisation is structured, what it looks like in comparison to some forces externally that will drive the segment or sector over the next few years. Equally, some of the sources that I'm about to expose you to as well do have some useful considerations for external factors as well, so they can build in. Just didn't want to introduce it too early because it might even made it even more confusing initially. So some of the sources would be Fame, Amadeus, PI Navigator, WARC, Bloomberg, and another couple of other sources which will be useful. So obviously we in the seminars have been trying to break down the groups into different sectors or segments that are useful. So we've seen all of these with governing bodies, with events governing bodies or commercial events and competition organisers, sports goods manufacturers and retailers, where there's a bit of integration from horizontal and vertical integration, which you'll start to explore a bit further as the module progresses. Some areas of facilities and health and fitness operators, both public sector, local authorities, and then some of the commercial operators. And the examples here predominantly linked to the UK, but similar picture elsewhere as well across the world in certain countries. Some professional sports clubs, some stadia and supporting services, media and broadcast, betting and gambling, and other areas which where we've been. So the first one that I want to introduce you to is something called Fame. So this details all the financial accounts for UK and Irish based companies, including public and private companies. So any organisation that declares anything through Companies House should be able to trace their financial records here. So in this example, I know Nova International, so they're effectively an events organiser and operator. So they're involved with the Great North Run, Great North Swim, and Great Run and Swim series across the UK and Ireland. I think it might be wider, but I'm not 100% sure. So it gives you some details of the organisation, some of the platforms that they're involved in. You can click in there and open up other windows to see examples, and that obviously overlaps with the way consumers, both participants and spectators, are engaging with different organisations and channels. You will see if you broke down Nova International that they're a subsidiary of Nova Marketing, and when you start to add in all the structure, then that in itself is interesting because you can see some organisations are structured in a way so they can grow certain parts of the business, they can divest certain parts of the business quickly, they can invest R&D and move resources and finances around in a slightly different way. So when you look at the turnover for Nova Marketing, that's in addition to Nova International, and that with the size of the employees gives you a completely different picture than if you were just looking at one entity in isolation. Speedo International, based in Nottingham, so obviously this is a subsidiary of the Pentland Group, but Speedo International probably competes predominantly with the likes of Arena, Tyr, Adidas to a degree with some elements of costumes, other international brands like Diana for high performance swimwear, and also other competitors which might be non-branded. And again, this is important for the external aspects. Some particular sports and functional areas of sports, the brand might not be as significant as it might be in other areas of sports manufacturing, where consumers buy products because of brand, whereas in other areas it is less so. But that's why we're analysing the segments in more detail as well, so we can see that. So if I look here, I can break down or find all the financials, usually for the last decade, and I can see here at headline level, so Speedo is about 107 million. It's been fairly flat really for about the last 5 years. A couple of changes up and down. There'll be other areas around where they've made money, where they've lost money. They will have spent a fair bit around R&D and development as technology was allowing suits to get faster. And then Pestel factor, particularly at high performance angle post aspects of World Championships late in the 2000s and Olympic Games meant now they've changed the law so you can't have the same type of materials. Speedo will have invested a significant amount, so would Arena in this area, so they might have lost some money initially and therefore looking at different areas where they can expand or use their brand. So you will see some organisations just extend the brand within the category, so swimwear and aquatics might include bags and other aspects, but not to the same degree. It's worthwhile looking at other industries and comparing as well. So one of the challenges and some of the regulatory aspects of sport with salary caps, with legal restrictions about how much money you can lose, all very interesting when you compare that to larger organisations. So and other sectors, aspects of what I've talked about in strategy for why you can and it's okay to make losses in certain sectors. So if I look at Vodafone Group, so fairly consistent around the 40 billion, so 40 billion pound turnover, up or down on certain years, and that will link to different developments with platforms for 3G, 4G, 5G, and essentially as faster services roll out in the future, they'll be there or thereabouts. But if you look at the numbers overall, you will see that in some years, an organisation of even of 40 billion pounds in revenue can make significant losses. So we can see here in certain years, profit and loss after tax and before tax can be quite significant, and that has challenges around cash flow, looking at reserves or what you've got, which we'll cover within finance and link that in other areas as well. So you might think, oh, actually there is an opportunity to buy other organisations. Some of that might be through loans, some of it might be through your own finances and reserves, and that will be useful and interesting to look at in certain sectors. Pure Gym, so now the largest health and fitness gym chain in the UK, essentially didn't even exist a decade ago, and you can look at the turnover growth and it's been fairly rapid over that period of time, so we could look at that over the last decade. Similar to Fame, Amadeus, so Amadeus is actually built on the same platform. The interface looks slightly different at the moment. This is what the old Fame database used to look like until it's been upgraded recently. So Amadeus is essentially the same platform, but where you're looking at European companies, and that should be public and private companies. So here I've just entered Real Madrid and it's CF, so Club de Football, and I can see latest revenues declared. I will interlink this with what we've said about early in the module, looking for if you could source the annual report, annual accounts elsewhere, because in some cases you can go and do this for most organisations. You can buy from different companies' house or equivalents in different countries. So I'm not exactly sure what the one would be in Spain in terms of name, but also I know if I went to the Real Madrid website, I probably might even find later accounts than what's being shown within Amadeus at the moment. But that's all part of what you will have been learning in finance around the reporting structure if you're a publicly listed company, and the time lag when it has to be submitted. And interlinked with this, when you see things like the annual review of football finance, which Deloitte produce, the reason why there's a time lag and there's always a delay behind is quite often the reporting of those numbers are maybe 9, 10, even almost 12 months behind when they've actually been incurred. But that links to corporate reporting across, and that also links to corporate governance requirements in different countries. But I can see here Real Madrid, I could break it down in a similar way. I can see Ajax, and then when you compare the two organisations, so not that long ago they were probably fairly comparable, and Ajax were not too far behind in terms of a number of what would be the equivalent of the Champions League trophies behind Real Madrid. But then you look at the revenues now, which is largely driven from broadcast and match day and commercial and sponsorship growth in different sectors, and you can see that there's a huge gulf now here between these, and then that links across multiple leagues. I can look at Intersport part of Rezo Intersport, so huge buying potential when you break down the organisation across the board for their operations in multiple countries. In France it's significant, it's over $1 billion. That's smaller than an equivalent in the UK for when you're looking at Sports Direct and JD Sports, but it's still a fair size within Intersport, and equally Decathlon's a lot larger in France than it would be in the UK and elsewhere in the world. In a similar way, if you wanted to look at other sectors, so health and fitness here, so McFit based in Germany, you can go and find their revenues, and actually when you start comparing that then, so McFit's bigger than Pure Gym. I've not looked at much more details of how many facilities it's got and how much money it's got, but that might mean, well, actually could we take our brand and move into other parts of continental Europe or other international markets? Don't know. Depends on the demand from different types of operations in the health and fitness sector. So as Chris introduces more around health and fitness, and the Ray Algar reports around health and fitness in the UK and internationally, you can cross-reference accordingly. BasicNet, so here, fair size organisation. BasicNet are effectively the holding company for the Kappa brand, and you look at the size of this organisation and what it's doing, interlink that with brand and brand positioning, which is again an interesting argument. PI Navigator, so if I click in and I go to Pion databases, I click into PI Navigator, it opens up something which is a different window, so it looks like this, and it's called Filings Expert when you do this. If you click in companies and then do an advanced search, so click in this tab like almost intuitively what you see in a browser window, and click in advanced, you can see that I've entered Nike. I've clicked on where it asks you that if you want to look at financial records. I've done that and then done a search, and then it brings up me a lot of 10K reports. So those of you who might have been in the seminars will have heard me talk about the difference between 10K and 8K reports and quarterly reporting if you're based in the US, which is much more pressurized, but also to a degree slightly more transparent. But if you pick up the wrong reports, you might be looking at incorrect data on an annual basis. So it's the 10K reports really that you're looking at predominantly for US operations. But it's not just US organisations. So I could do the same with Adidas, I could do the same with Puma and competitors, and it will bring me up lots of financial data. You can see here as well, so I've looked at Anta, so I can get their accounts either in Chinese or in English for the last few years. So it does enable you to do analysis internationally at an organisation level. When you open up a 10K report using this particular tool, it's demonstrated like this, so headline perfect information. And I'm obviously not going to include it all because these reports can be 300, 400 words long depending. And when you explore and read at a headline level, and as you're breaking down the organisation, you're trying to understand how organisations are structured, you'll see here that in the US, here Nike has got some of their own brand factories, it's got some of their own stores, it's got some subsidiary stores, so Converse and Hurley that they own, and it'll be similar in international markets. I could go and find revenue by category in different regional areas, and I can see how much of a reliance they are in different markets and the brands. And whilst this is organisation specific, if you do some analysis, these reports can enable you to enhance what you might have looked at within Porter's 5 forces of industry structure, competitive rivalry, and understand. And if you are breaking down a like-for-like internal analysis with your competitors, these tools can be really quite useful. They will take you a lot of time to do, but they can be quite useful. But again, if I reiterate what I said, if you're looking at similar segments, you don't all have to do the same work as long as you're working together and working smartly. So here I can see some things around Nike, around R&D, manufacturing base, where they are, how easy is it to shift suppliers, so talking about where they're located, etc. And so reading between the lines would enable you to explore the organisations. The World Advertising Research Centre, some of you, and this is probably more useful within marketing, but in certain segments, then the value of brands and the value of marketing and marketing communications is significant. So here, if I enter a term Li Ning and it pulls out some case studies, elements might be useful when you're doing some comparisons. So here at the bottom article, even on this page, before I scroll through and look at how useful it is, it's talking about sportswear in China and how local brands have challenged larger global brands, but in China it hasn't been, and it might not always be the same position, and that will probably see developments globally. We also have a number of other types of sources, so it is worth scanning all the databases. And when I've told you the cost of some of these reports and the cost of a single user FAME license is probably around £6,000. So that would be the equivalent for Amadeus. PI Navigator is probably even more expensive. The likes of WARC even more expensive, but in a slightly different way. So whilst you're here, you definitely can be developing skills of research and analysis using databases, and that's a good skill. It's a good skill for this module, but it's also a good skill that all employers and academia is looking for as well. So depending what your future aspirations are, developing some ability and competencies in this area is definitely advantageous. Okay, the challenge here for Bloomberg is it's only located in the city campus. There's not that many computers that have it. I haven't actually used it myself. I just know I've used it in the past, and I know it's a useful source. So some of you might want to go and explore elements where it can help. And then EBSCO House, which is complementary to ProQuest, which is directed to through the sport channel. Not sport channel, the sport sector area that Joe Dobson and the team within the Learning Centre have set up. But we don't just want to be looking at sport and Sport Discus for source credibility overall. Okay, hope that's of use. Certainly we'll learn a lot if you spend some time using these sources, and we'll see you soon in the seminars. All right, keep well. Bye-bye.